This is Clint on AquaBrain. Leave while you can, okay?
How cola, brothers and sisters. Welcome to AquaBrain TV. On this show, we chat Red Pill Sunday School, what you're not taught about the law, the U.S., and the world, with Clint Richardson. Coming to us from somewhere in Utah. You can find Clint at Red Pill Sunday School on YouTube and realityblogger.wordpress.com.
Hey, this is Clint Richardson. I'm officially announcing my retirement from this bullshit movement. Join me on AquaBrain TV where we'll talk about it.
Clint, it's awesome to have you back on, man. Thank you. Yeah, I assume that is the thank you and good luck blog post that you just put out.
That's part of it. Yeah, there's no use in putting a bunch of stuff out that can't be found. One, I'd have to pretty much start over if I was to, I'd have to start a new blog and somehow connect it. And honestly, I'm just tired of it. I've figured out a few things behind the scenes that have made me pretty much question the whole thing anyway. So I'm kind of done. I'm gonna be honest. I'm over the whole thing. I'm tired of hearing about sovereignty. I'm tired of hearing about, I'm sovereign. I'm gonna go vote for my ruler. I'm just tired of it. I think the whole thing's bullshit, and I've come up with a personal nickname for the whole. I used to call it the truth movement. I certainly won't call it that anymore because there's no truth in it. People don't want to hear the truth. So I'm pretty much at this point calling it the false redemption movement. Everybody's looking for redemption. Nobody wants to turn to the Bible, but everybody's looking for some kind of redemption, right? The redemption process. Hey, I'm going to turn in my Social Security and my this, and I'm going to become free because some paperwork now says I'm free instead of a slave. Right, or I'm going to get a passport that's not from the U.S., even though the only agency that issues them is the United States. But it's going to say that I'm from the sovereign state. I'm like, yeah, no such thing. I looked up all this history. I looked up the history of the world. Finally, I finally said, okay, what happens if I look at international law instead of just looking at slave law? Like, I'm a citizen. This is my law. And the romanticism that's all built around that, the patriotism. What happens if I go outside of that and I look at international law, which has always been there?
So is that the Unidroit?
Unidroit is basically what they're trying to get people to go into as an international standard for international law contract. In other words, anytime it'd be similar to you join. You get your computer. Good example, right? You're all excited, and it says before you can start this product or open this computer, you got to log in and accept the end user agreement. Well, if you read that, it's going to tell you that you're not going to be allowed to use your system of law. It'll be the law based in some state or some country. It'll be arbitrated. You won't be able to use the court system. And the arbitration process you can't argue with, and they get to choose the arbiter, not you, and all this stuff. And you're like, wait a minute, you just pretty much said that if I agree to use this computer and I somehow get into some kind of problem, that I cannot even use my own system of law because I've agreed now to an international contract that literally will not allow me to use my own law. That's what everybody's getting into. That's what we're going into more and more is international law. And that's the goal. That's the purpose of getting everybody this digital ID and getting them into cryptocurrencies. Talk about this.
Yeah, let's talk about crypto.
Well, you talk about your stupid ideas. I'm going to use a currency that's based in no country, that's based under no law, and that has no sovereignty. It represents nothing. It is literally only worth anything because you can trade it in dollars, which will devalue the dollar and make everything go crazy. And the worst part of it is, what the hell is it that defines a country? It's currency.
Yeah, you got into that
You want
in
to
your latest show.
devalue? I mean, you seriously going to devalue your own country's currency? What do you think's going to happen? I mean, people just aren't thinking about. At the same time, there's this constant. I'm a patriot. I'm a sovereign. I'm this. I'm that. I love my country, and I. Everybody doesn't even know that they're not in a country. They're in a corporation. It calls itself a country. So I'm just over it. We can talk about it all you want because, like I said, here's what happened to me
Okay, let's hear it.
when I was in your position. Okay,
Oh,
when I was in it for a while. Keeping in mind, I was in this after 9/11. I wanted to interview people who'd been like sort of in it for a while, and I noticed that there's this select group of people who did this really fantastic work who'd quit, who'd been like, I'm giving this is bullshit, I'm giving it up, I'm not going to do this anymore. And what I noticed now in hindsight is that they all had the same reason. And people like James Montgomery, the Informer, all these different people, they had the same reason, and that was that they read the Law of Nations. The Law of Nations. Why is nobody
and
talking about
what did they find, Clint?
Law of Nations? They found international law. They found that. I'm assuming they found what I found, which is to start when you start questioning your own beliefs. It's like coming out of religion, right? This is a religion, by the way. The truth movement, the patriot movement, the sovereignty, it is a religion. And that's a hard thing to come around and admit to yourself. It's a hard thing to come out of a cult or a religion because you have to face your own belief system, right? You believe these things are true. Well, let's take one example. The whole thing is based on the notion that at some point states were sovereign, right? Without states being sovereign, the whole thing just falls apart, right? So I'm like, are states sovereign? Does anybody ever bother to look, or do we just take each other's word for it? Well, we take each other, we pass it on religiously. We don't verify was this state ever actually sovereign? And when we talk about that sovereignty, are we talking about internally or are we talking about externally? Are we talking about the law of nations? Are we talking about inside the United States? Or are we talking about even outside of the United States? Are states somehow separate? Well, the question then becomes, how are states formed? Do you know how a state is formed? How did a state become a state?
I'm probably going to be wrong, but does it have
okay.
something to do with the Constitution?
You got to be wrong before you can be right. That's what I've learned, and I'm the prime example.
Well, I sat through your last video, and by the way, everyone the confusion doesn't necessarily get alleviated by watching your last.
but the next couple will. The next ones are what we're going to be talking about because, dude, once you discover the nation state, once you discover political science, you're like, oh, okay, this whole thing's BS. Like I said, political science not something we're supposed to be talking about because oh, God forbid you should talk about politics or religion, right? So
yeah, let's hope it loads.
So I know. So I look. It's in my nature. I want to verify things. Because I have this certain belief system that I've developed from all the people. I mean, I don't listen much to people anymore. Lately, I just do my own research. But from remembering the stuff at school, seeing it on the Fox News is promoting all this patriotism and history of the United States, which is all lies, and you go, look, here's how a state is formed, okay? First, there is a territory of the United States. A territory of the United States, of meaning belonging to. So let's take the Oregon Territory, or whatever. You're familiar with that history where the territories were then divided into states. Well, if they were a territory of the United States, well, and the state wasn't formed, the people petitioned the government to form a state and develop a border. The Congress writes up the package. The president then signs it into the United States law that a state exists, and the people accept a constitution that says United States and its constitution is supreme law of the land. Tell me, where's the sovereignty? Now, now,
Just got signed away, right?
Well, wait. If it was first belongs to the United States, then a corporation of people started a state. Right. At what point did it not be? Is it not a territory? And to answer that question, all you have to do is look at the Civil War when the states started to secede, right? Well, in the opinion of the United States, they're stealing United States land. And so they go in and beat the crap out of them. This wasn't a war of slavery. This was a war. And to prove that, you can go like to the Appomattox Courthouse website where it says that even though the Confederacy, they bowed out of Congress, leaving it in a day, so illegitimate Congress, no more Congress. And they went and they tried to form their own confederation. Well, guess what? What does confederation mean? Conspiracy or combination. What did we have? The Articles of Confederation against the king, conspiracy against the king. So the Confederation, now we have a new new conspiracy of people who don't want to be part of this nation state that's been born, this corporation that's been built in Washington, D.C. that wants to control everything. So all of a sudden, you have these states that want to be a separate nation state. But see, nobody ever talks about this part. What were they trying to do? How would that have happened? The only way that would have happened is if the nations of the world, the United Nations, recognizes the Confederacy as its own nation state. See, the true history of this country and every country in the world, practically, that's not already a monarchy, is that they got tricked into starting or forming what they call a republic, a commonwealth, a self-governing nation. No, problem is there's no such thing as a nation. Nation doesn't. There's no nation in the world that's actually a physical thing. A nation is a spiritual concept. And that's why they're trying to beat down nationality so much, is because the nationality or the nation part of a country is the belief system and the like-mindedness of a people. That's why you beat it down like they have. That's why nationality is such a demonized term now, because you don't want people to have a nationalistic fervor. What's the reason we're forming the country? That's nationalism, right? Why is our states protecting one another? That's nationalism. That's the spiritual motivation. So nations are spiritual. But what happens then when the idea of the nation gets usurped and incorporated into this thing called a nation state? When the nation, the idea, becomes a corporation, a state. So I look and there's all these countries, right? I mean, Russia, China, they all call themselves republics. And yet in the truth movement, we're a republic. We're awesome because we're like the lone republic in the world. Texas and all these, we're a republic. Doesn't mean anything. It means absolutely nothing, because there's no such thing as a nation. It's in the head, right? So the problem is that all countries were first tricked into becoming a republic in order for the international body under international law, which the Constitution says that it is under, the United States is under
Fascinating.
international law. Well, you go read the law of nations, you start understanding this. You start understanding every country in the world has been incorporated into a nation state. That is what the United Nations is. Started as the League of Nations.
So republic to nation or territory, republic, nation state.
Well, the territory is already belongs to the United States. The United States is the one that, because its army is technically, the United States Army, it conquers the territory, and then the state is created. Yeah, then the state is created from the territory. And when you look at the United Nations and its definition of what a nation state is, it's a territory that's been conquered, or another word for conquered is purchased. Because either way, whether I buy your soul or I conquer it, there's no difference, right? You're either doing it involuntarily or voluntarily. So conquer and purchase, when you look it up legally, means the same thing, right? Remember we bought out the Indians for some beads or something, right?
Blankets, yeah.
Has some
Oxville
beads.
Blankets.
Yes, we're gonna take the fictional thing called your land, and we're gonna take it from you, and
That's what I love. That's what I love about your videos, Clint. Is you go into the definitions and you don't leave a word undefined. If there's an important word, you're defining everything.
You really can't, or you're lost. You're because you develop then this belief system, this foundational fallacy that everything's built on, and maxim of law, right? If you're it's been the Bible, it's in everywhere. If your foundation is flawed, your superstructure will always fail. Right? The church is built on the rock. What's the rock? Well, it's a metaphor for the people. Without people, there's no church, right? People think, oh, look at that church. It's a building. No, the church is the people. Just like a state is supposed to be the people. But they've replaced all that with corporations, international contractual corporations. Everything is commercial. You go to Philadelphia and look at where the Constitution was framed and signed, right? I've never seen a more commercial hub in my life. I couldn't believe the symbology. I mean, it's the most Masonic, horribly commercial thing that I've ever witnessed. I just couldn't believe it. And now I understand. Yeah, this was built to be the new world, right? The new commercial world. So when we're talking about the law of nations, and when we're talking about the international law, you're talking about the contract. You're talking about the law of the sea. You're talking about the law of getting into a contract that takes you above and outside of any local system of law. Well, that's what the United States is. The United States leaves local affairs to the states, but that doesn't make them sovereign, right? Let me prove it to you. Oh, look, I've got an ID card, a permission card, and I got it from my local doctor, and it says I can smoke marijuana legally in California, right? Okay, but you're a United States citizen. Is it legal in the United States? Can you therefore get in trouble? Do marijuana facilities that sell marijuana in California get raided by the feds? Yes, because it's illegal. The state is not sovereign. Just because you have a little card from the state, all that means is the state ain't going to mess with you. But the state is like the post office to the Fed. Is like any other. It's just a corporation that, because it receives funding and everything and because it recognizes the United States as the sovereign, there is no state sovereignty. There never was. That's the biggest fallacy I think we have in this entire thing. That I don't know. Like I said, I call it the false redemption movement. Ooh.
Yeah, and your latest I'm sorry, your latest video that you just put out, you go into some of those pitfalls where you get onto the internet and find some paperwork that you sign out, and that's essentially what you just went through was hey, look, these things are not legitimate, and this is why.
No, nothing. There's. Sorry, I'm getting a call here. Hang on,
It's maybe it's
let me.
Pat. Maybe it's Pat Jordan who wants to get in on this. That'd be awesome.
So yeah, well, I mean, to be clear, the video you're talking about is me going to the FBI website where it says, no, this is fraud. You could be fined or get in a lot of trouble. That's at the end of the video. I mean, all the websites that tell you, okay, no, there is not a treasury account that has billions of dollars that you're going to somehow find in the end of your magical journey, like, The Hobbit or something. You're not going to cash in your birth certificate or your ID or something for a bunch of money. Why? Well, actually, the Federal Reserve tells you why on its own website and warns you to avoid these fallacies, these things that people don't go and verify, right? And it says treasury accounts. There are no treasury accounts for people. It's a treasury. It only deals with freaking banks. And so you're like, oh, so there's no possible way that the treasury account would have an account called Clint Richardson in it that's been getting a bunch of money because I was born, right? I mean, the whole thing is crazy. Now, that gets confounded with some legitimate things where there are certain things that happen out there. I mean, I'll give you an example that is a legitimate thing. It's horrible, but it's legitimate. It's how the system works. I won't say it's legitimate. It's all part of an illegitimate system. But in the illegitimate system, it is legitimate to say that there is for instance, a CRIS system, a court registry investment system. You can look that up yourself. And it takes all of the cases, right, that come through, like all the idiots that go through and pay their fines for their traffic tickets and all that stuff or whatever. All of those accounts, right? Judge says, well, okay, first, let's start at the beginning. Okay, your police officer, a frickin' meter maid who has a requirement to file a bunch of tickets to get money for their illegitimate operation, right? So he issues you a ticket, as we call it, right? A citation. It's actually a notice to appear in court. Okay? He says, oh, well, I'm going to be nice and only charge you $500 this time or whatever. Then you go to court, and the judge, oh, we're being nice. It's your first offense. We're only going to charge you $100, right? Or you go to court, and the judge says, well, usually, we're going to charge you this much. We're going to charge. Anyway, they get this big number, like $1,000, right? I say, well, we're not going to make you pay $1,000. I'm going to be a nice guy. Ching, and I'm only going to charge you $300, but don't let it happen again because I won't be this nice. So what he's done is he's created a financial instrument for $1,000. Police officer created a financial instrument for $500. Judge says you only have to pay $100. Don't let me see you in here again. But you still have a financial instrument for $500. Okay.
Oh.
Now,
So
anytime
on it.
Anytime, like the whole Social Security system, for instance, everybody knows it's debt instruments. Everything in the Social Security account is basically an IOU. It's debt. So anything that will be paid out of it must be first paid in through the form of some payment, right? So it's all, there's no actual money there. It's what people owe on, because government is the number one investor in debt.
Right. In this country, debt is wealth.
Yeah, if you know a millionaire or two, I guarantee one of them will have made their fortune investing in debt, buying other people's loans, whatever, because you're buying the principal and getting all the interest, but the interest doesn't come, right? This is why banks hypothecate. They sell loans, right? I'm gonna go get a loan for $500,000 to get a home. 45 days later, you got a new bank that owns your loan. You're like, what the hell? Well, that's because
Yeah.
bank number one could wait 30 years
Yeah.
to get its money, right?
Or they could get their money
Or it
now.
could say, well, I've got a financial instrument here. We didn't actually give any money to, I mean, the money's created from the paperwork that they fill out. There is no actual money. That is in the Federal Reserve document. I can't remember what it's called, how reserve funds are created. When the bank writes out the loan document, that's when that money is created. The bank doesn't loan you any money. It's just the agent, and you're pretty much using your name on a mortgage, which is a dead pledge. So you're going through this middleman, this bank. Well, the bank says, okay, I've got a financial instrument now for $500,000 plus probably another, I don't know, maybe $1 million in interest.
Wow.
I've got a $1.5 million document here, let's just say, because I've charged you all kinds of interest, that I can either wait 30 years to collect on, chances are you'll go bankrupt or something, or I could sell the loan. Well, says bank number one to bank number two, I've got this loan. I'll give it to you for, say, $400,000. Bank says, yeah, it's worth 1.5 million towards the end. This bank now, in 45 days, made $400,000. It didn't loan you anymore. It doesn't have to pay off anything.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Your loan is now technically paid off, although they don't tell you that. They expect you to be dumb enough to know that when a bank buys your loan, or not to know that when another bank buys your loan, they just paid it off. But they're going to keep collecting because people don't know this, right? So now bank number one has 400,000, whereas it had nothing before, and it just got rid of it doesn't have to bill you anymore. Bank number two has 45 days before it can sell it, and of course there's bank number three just waiting to buy the loan, right?
Yeah, why not?
It says, well, we bought it for 400. We want to make, say, 200, so 600. Absolutely, that thing's worth 1.5 million. So bank number two just made about $150,000 after all the process is done in 45 days. And now bank number three has a loan that's worth 1.5 million. Minus the 600 it paid for it, right? It's pretty good, $900,000 over 30 years, or now it's 29 years and 10 months or whatever, right?
What a racket.
So yeah, you remember. So what happens though after once they sell it so many times? Because that's 400. That's $1 million that's already been made on that loan, right? 400,000, 600. That's not just an individual thing. So already it's been hypothecated to the tune of, if that gets sold a few more times, each time higher, then there's more money that has been transacted in the hypothecation, in the selling process, than the loan is worth.
Well, and you're still on the hook, right?
But well, you think you are, but you're actually not. This is, people get these dismissed all the time because, I mean, this is not what you agreed to. But the
no legal
the point
advice.
is,
We're not offering
the point is, remember 2008? Remember the financial crisis?
Yeah.
Well, what do you expect is going to happen when you've sold a something, you've hypothecated it to the point where you've made 4 or 5 million off a 1.5 million promise to pay, and now the person has declared bankruptcy or the home gets foreclosed. There's no one to pay even that. So you've made 6 million, 7 million, 10 million off of this document, and the banks they're just like, okay, in and out, we're done, no more responsibility, we make all this money, all because We don't know what we're doing when we sign the loan documents. We are creating the money through the document. It's being created literally out of what they call the reserve or thin air.
Yep.
And now you have this value. So what does the court system do? And many other systems.
Well, they got to
Just
get their
one
piece,
example.
right?
Right. Well, what do? They say, okay, I've got this financial document we just created because that police officer wrote it up, or that judge, you owe this much. But in reality, he's going to write, 5,000, but I'm going to charge you 1,000. He's going to put a $5,000 document that's an IOU, that's essentially a financial resource. He's going to put it in the court registry investment fund because you have 30 days to pay, or 60 days, or maybe you're going to make payments, right? Maybe they'll have this in their system for 6 months. And maybe when they receive your payment, they won't cash it right away because every day that $5,000 document, that promise to pay, is getting interest in the court registry investment fund.
Man.
Right? So imagine, let's just say 100,000 different small financial documents. $100 here, $200, $1,000, right? All put together. You suddenly have $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion worth of IOUs, which are what a dollar is. It's an IOU,
Yeah.
right? If you're stuck with the dollar, in the end, you're screwed, right? Because it's an IOU. No one's going to accept it anymore. It's an IOU. So the court registry investment system and the number that's put on it, which is a CUSIP, CUSIP or SSIP, and that's a securities and exchange number, right?
Okay.
That's put upon this bundled security, basically, and that sits there, and that's how the courts make money because it's not just what it's all the promises to pay, put it bundled into a security, and then invested either in something that'll return interest or some stock or whatever, but usually something that returns interest because that's a guaranteed thing. So, I mean, on $1 billion worth of individual IOUs, they're going to make millions of dollars in that 30 days or whatever that security exists. And that is the so-called legitimate system that the court works on. Every court participates in it because those aren't actually courts. They are corporations, half the time owned by the judge who runs them.
Give me an overview of what people might find on the Red Pill Sunday School. You're in your second season.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the first season goes through so much of the history and stuff. For instance, the whole history of the Confederacy that I was saying, and how the international, the nations of the international body that's always been, really. I mean, just because they started the United Nations doesn't mean there wasn't a similar functioning, unofficial body before that. There was always international law and international purview. It's just that at that time, when the Confederacy tried to be internationally recognized, it was not, and therefore it was not given protection under the law of nations. So it was treated as any dictator could treat its people. Any country out there could treat its people. Like I said, China's a republic, so don't think that a republic is something good. Russia's a republic. All these countries that we consider communist or bad or whatever, they're republics because they were all, put into this thing. So the history of that, where you see that even though it had all the trappings of a nation state, it was not recognized as one. The nation state thing started about 400 years ago with the Treaty of Westphalia. Switzerland was the first quote unquote country to be created that was never actually a country. It's a nation state. It never was anything else. That's why
That's
it's
interesting.
that's why it's such an interesting country when it comes to the financial, and it's always been this neutral sort of country, right?
Right. And
Well,
I don't
it's
think
not a country.
they didn't have the facial covering mandates or any of that too, right? They were
Right, right. And
kind of like a testing
that
ground
all
almost.
that all comes from the treaty and the if you again if you go back to the Constitution and you understand treaties are law. That's why all these treaties that are being signed constantly, they're a kick again. Read any treaty, and they're a kick in the face of any idea that states or sovereign or ever were. There is no, you
Well,
know,
there's an interesting thing, Clint, that because you brought up treaties, and Pat Jordan did a video on how the First Nations people, which is kind of an interesting term, right? They can't do anything. They don't have anybody to go to because the president is a what, an administrative position, and it's not actually the president of the treaty.
yeah, they call it. It's the administrative state is what it's called. You get there's tons of books on the administrative state. You want to know about it? I did a video. I can't even remember. I think it was one of the Red Pill Sunday schools, but I did a whole series on the administrative state, what that means, and I mean the difference between the delusion of we're a free people and we're self-governing and all that um, is if you're administrated, well, employees are administrated, right? I mean, slaves are administrated,
Right.
right? It means you don't have a choice. It means that you have a certain set of rules that you have to follow that are commercial, not right. There's no administration in things that aren't commercial. So again, it's a notion that you know you're in some form of contract, um, whether it's a compact or some other form. That is how you know you're in this administrative or commercial aspect of things. And I mean, even the US code at its very beginning says that half this code is de facto, meaning rebuttable or illegitimate as opposed to lawful or de jure. And everything that is de facto or illegitimate, or in other words, commercial, is commercial in nature, banking and all this different stuff. Anything to do with money or commerce is agriculture and all those different things. They're listed as illegitimate functions of government de facto. So every country in the world runs this way. You have the so-called legitimate, and then it forms this corporate nation state corporation thing. What I used to call the corporation nation, now I understand it's the nation state. It's a model that is recognized internationally under international law, and it is when you look at sovereign states according to the international body of the United Nations or any other international body, you will only see United States. You will not see California. You will not see New York. You will not see the 13 colonies, right? You won't see anything but the nation state, which is the United States, which is in Washington, D.C., not part of the states, right? There is no sovereign state but the nation state in international law. When you go to Great Britain, when you go to Ireland, Northern Ireland, when you go to Scotland, they are not recognized as sovereign countries. I couldn't believe it when I looked this up, but I said, well, wait a minute. What is the difference between the United States and the United Kingdom? And it turns out pretty much the same thing. It's a nation state recognized internationally, and there is no England or Great Britain. There is no Ireland or Northern Ireland. One of the two is separate, and then Scotland. They are not recognized as sovereign countries. Don't let anybody ever tell you differently. Now, from an
What are they?
interior
Nation
perspective,
states. right?
Well, no, they're part of the nation state, but they're
Of
not
Great Britain.
sovereign in and of themselves. They're not recognized
Oh,
as sovereign states.
wow.
Only the nation state. So every country in the world, again, first they were tricked into becoming a republic or something similar, destroyed through democracy, and put into this nation state model where any notion of sovereignty. Now, there is the notion of self-governing, of
Which is interesting. Yeah.
right, and that's a completely different thing because, but see, what that means is that you're not participating in any of that. You're not doing commerce, and that's a completely different.
But you're
It's a
talking,
completely different
yeah, so
subject. It's
you're,
personal. In other words, it's
yeah.
individual. It's not group. It's not the
Would you
people.
say that's more spiritual, the self-governing?
Yes, it's 100% spiritual because it's not commercial. Absolutely. And if you do commerce, that's where all these gurus come in and tell you, well, I live the private. I'm a private traveler, and I'm doing that. Well, all they're doing is they're
So,
entering into this. They're entering into this international law thing. They're creating trusts, and I just found out that a trust is considered a person
oh, really?
in
Whoa.
law,
Yeah,
right?
it
So,
makes sense.
yeah, I mean now it does, and all they're doing is they're abandoning. My problem is this: is that you're abandoning any semblance of a sovereign people or state. You're entering into commerce, which is always international. There's no exception. And you're doing so through international law and contract under all these unidroit principles and all these things. You're leaving you're you're I mean, for all intents and purposes, you're a traitor. You're getting into you're leaving your people behind and you're becoming an international persona, a corporate structure that no longer has a spirit, and yet I'm a private traveler. I right no, actually, you've entered yourself into this system, and there's nothing protecting. Right? There's nothing really there to protect such things. This is always what I was going for. Yes, there are private associations. Yes, there are these private things, but very few people have the spiritual knowledge or strength to be able to participate in those. A lot of people abuse them, which in the end they will not be able to use their privacy as an excuse for breaking the law or doing some evil,
Well,
right?
you do go into that in your last video. I mean, it's amazing how you break it down. There was one thing I wanted to talk about that you brought up. Probably one of the most fascinating things that I didn't know about was, and help me here, there's these privately owned corporations that are around, like Disney just came, we just found out Disney has this self-governing thing in Florida or whatever. But you're talking about stuff where I was checking my tags. I'm like, where's this made?
Well, no, you're talking about just private associations.
I think, well, you were
Well,
talking about like housing associations, stuff like that.
yeah,
But
yeah.
you were talking about something down in South America or something that was where
There's
they're making t-shirts.
yeah, you're talking about the trade zones, the foreign trade zones. Now, a long time ago, I did a lecture somewhere around here at some fairgrounds, trying to warn people about Agenda 21, which is now Agenda 2030, and these foreign trade zones, agenda, sustainable development, all that stuff. And I went through the entirety of how in Salt Lake City here they'd already created this foreign trade zone. And basically, what these foreign trade zones are is that right in the heart. Well, okay, let's start at the beginning. First, they created You've heard you're familiar with NAFTA, the
Was
superhighways, and all
that
that
was that
stuff.
Clinton?
It was
Or was
back
I?
way back when, yeah, and
Yeah.
it's been an ongoing thing. It's what it
Sure.
basically is an agreement between Mexico and Canada
Oh, gotcha.
to North America Free Trade Union, free trade zones, right? So these highways then become, for all intents and purposes, they it's a really bizarre way to look at it, but it's how they consider it. They become virtual waterways. So the road becomes a waterway, and a waterway is considered something that's international. It's in other words, law of the sea. It is no longer part of the United States. In other words, no longer part of the state. Especially, it becomes an international trade road for or passage, and it goes from Mexico all the way to Canada. So technically, you could bring your drugs from Mexico, drive on this freeway with only certain designated stops or free trade zones,
Huh.
and I could bring my drugs in from Mexico straight into Salt Lake City into a free trade zone where there is no U.S. law and no customs.
Offload your fentanyl.
Offload your drugs, whatever it is,
Yeah.
weapons, money, what people, right? And that whole time, there no cop can stop you. You cannot be
Wow.
stopped because you're on an international, virtual, waterway. So
Unbelievable.
you're under this international law. There is no more local or common or any kind of law that affects that or the trade zone. And so naturally, what they've, you said you're checking your tags.
Yeah.
We a long time
Honduras.
ago, I remember we were going to make a video. We were walking through Macy's or some department store, and we're filming, and we're just looking at all the prices, and then the tags: made in Bangladesh, made in Taiwan, made in Guatemala, made in nothing, made in America, right?
Honduras,
Whole
right?
stores,
Honduras was
whole stores that are so American in their appearance, and yet nothing's made in America. And it's like 90% of the stuff, right? And you're
one
talking
in.
cheap, 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 cheap,
Yeah.
cheap labor. Why? Because they set up what are called FTZs, foreign trade something, foreign trade zone.
Yeah.
And so there's a new model that they've created that's even worse. And basically, well, there's no law. There's no labor law. So this is when you hear of these children's these horrible conditions for workers and these children's labor and women, when you see those things about China, these are foreign trade zones. They don't have any local law. There is no protection um, at all.
I remember what it was that struck me as just fascinating. That you found that these workers are getting paid just a little bit more
Yes.
than like the doctors and the other trade
Yes.
workers around. So it's like
And
it's more enticing to
that's
work.
the new model is that slave work, yeah, putting together products or clothes or whatever, shoes in horrible conditions, no benefits, but they're able to pay an amount because I'm paying you as a corporate, as Nike, right? I'm paying you a Reebok or some other corporation. I'm paying in dollars, but you're receiving, dineros. You're receiving whatever local currency, and so the local currency, for every dollar I spend on your wage, I'm actually only spending maybe 5 cents. So, yes, what they've figured out is that they can trick people, essentially force people by creating these giant foreign trade zones, taking all the work away from everyone else, that they can pay those people the most because of that exchange rate, and therefore the doctors and the vets and the people who we've always considered to have these prestigious, funny
Sure.
word because it means magic, but
Right.
what we consider as, I want to be a firefighter, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be this, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because we're stupid kids. Um, we they're paying these laborers in horrible conditions, more money than the doctor.
Right.
The doctor can quit their job as a specialist and go put together shoes and make more money.
And that's destroying these countries. That's
And it's,
destroying
of
these
course
countries.
it is, because,
Yeah.
well, you gotta consider the best way to destroy anything is to take the prosperity or the product of your labor, right, and exchange it for worthless paper. Meanwhile, the goods are being transferred and sold, at outrageously marked up prices, and you're left with these local wages, which on the surface, yeah, it sounds, oh, they're making a lot of money. They're not making a lot of money. They're making average money, but compared to, I mean, doctors don't make
Right.
that much, so it's pathetic. But it's standard. That is what the world has become and is trying to spread. So what I'm trying to get across most is that the whole idea behind globalization is not what people think. It's to get you to act in a global situation. It's to get you to abandon your own law, your own, by contract, your own spirituality, your own nation, your nationality. It's to get you to always enter into some form of contract to where you're abandoning your own system. Your arbitrator will be in Switzerland, or the law that binds the contract will be in a country that you don't even speak the language, which is where Unidroid comes in, because Unidroid, once you accept it universally, then it's in all languages, right? Oh, it pisses me off to know this, because, like I said, it's been going on under our noses. We just don't know.
it
Uh,
it appears like the system is in free fall right now.
well, I mean, you have to destroy to create, right? I mean, you have to make people essentially abandon their own identity, their own existence, and get into this false narrative. This, like I
Sell them
said,
something,
remember one thing. If you get anything out of this, every time you sign an end user agreement, or for anything, I mean, and you're doing it for everything now. Remember, companies are no longer selling you products; they're making you lease them, because in the lease you're agreeing to basically a lawless, you're no longer in your system of law. You're in some international thing. You have no idea. When it comes to dispute it, they're like, aha, um, talk to the arbitrator. uh, and an arbitrator can they get to pick it. It's not even your choice, right? So, or you agree to who the arbitration company is going to be beforehand, and they're on the payroll of that company. There is no good end to this type of thing, and yet it's where the money is. It's where the temptation is. It's where what we have been entrained to think is good, which is actually evil, as the Bible says, we'll start to, be attracted to evil and think it's good, and we'll hate what is good, and we'll love what is bad. So, I mean, it's happening, and there's not much you can do about it, because except to protect yourself. Unfortunately,
So
there is no real group of people that have come together to protect one another, and that's what my whole goal was. But I mean, I'm so tired of trying that. Besides that, I tell you that unless you, how do I say this? Okay. I don't care. I don't care who I offend. All the people I've met, all the fucking hosts, and I don't give a shit anymore. You cannot sell the truth. Okay, if you're in this thing that we call this movement, the movement that never moves, you can't sell truth. I mean, I had my John Stadtmiller told me, the guy, the head of RBN. He's like, I can't sell your stuff, right? Which was to one of the things he promised, that, well, we'll get you syndicated, and we'll get you this and this, and then after a year, he's like, man, I'm not gonna make you go away from the station. It's too valuable, but I can't sell what you're saying. I can't sell the truth. And to hear him say that outright was one of the most disturbing things I'd ever heard. And I realized I either start bullshitting and trying to sell the redemption thing, or sell this or sell that, or I keep my I keep my spirit, I keep my my moral compass, and I keep going. And I kept going, and at this point, I mean, I don't know what to say. I guess it's time to get a job, because all those people who said, "Oh, Clint," even though I warned against it, "Oh, Clint, I'm going to invest in Bitcoin. We're going to make millions, and I'm going to give you a bunch of money so you can keep doing what you're going to do." You know how many of those showed up? You want how many of those people? In other words, I'm freaking broke and I got to go get a job, because now all my information's censored, and there's no place to go when you're telling the truth. You have to break away and become either solitary, or find a group of people that worship the truth, i.e., God, the truth. You cannot sell it. You cannot. There's nothing you can do to. This is not a truth movement, is what I'm trying to say. It's
Yeah, no,
very much
I totally
it's
agree with
very
you.
much not. So I'm trying to save you some grief, because when I started, I thought, oh, okay, great, man. These are the people that are grabbing on to what I'm putting out there. So these must be it's the truth movement. Oh, that sounds so great. That
Yeah.
means they want the truth no matter how much it hurts, and it'll kill my ego. And no, that's not what it's about. No, it's actually a
Did
religion that we
yeah.
call, patriotism, and it's not at
Did
all what you think.
did you ever do a video, or did you ever talk about the colleges and the patents and all that?
I I have two more movies that I'm going to put out, that I've been working on for a long time, and I just got sidetracked. One of them is the patent wars. I think I want to say it's the Lethal Injection movie, but it's about all the colleges, the universities.
Yeah.
And that's their main business, is patents. And the
It's
patent
fascinating.
wars, just so amazing how many, what they own. And that's where their money really comes from. The education is kind of third in line to sports, and patenting products and drugs, and freaking chimeric viruses and all that stuff. So it's a really interesting thing, and I'm those are the last two things
Yeah.
I'll probably do. I'm gonna finish up this the on the nation state thing.
Yeah.
I'm going into the full history, papers from Cambridge and from all these different high
Oh, awesome.
level high level places that will explain the whole thing, and leave you with no doubt of what I'm trying to get across, which I'm not sure I am. It's just there's no it's the sovereignty thing. It's such a lie.
Yeah.
I'm so pissed about that. It's just so
So is
it's
that
disheartening.
the current release that you're working on?
Well, I mean,
Or are you working on a few different things, or
I've been working on getting some calluses back on my fingers. I've been playing guitar more than anything,
nice. Nice, man.
I'm kind of like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm
Yeah.
not only am I tired of the trolls, but I'm tired of I don't have any outlet to promote it anymore. There's no, I'm just kind of dead in the water. So what gives me hope? What gives me hope is, I always tell people, look, these documentaries are free. You can repost it. You can edit it. Don't complain that it's 9 hours. Make it a 2 hour one out of it. It's all there for you. Do it yourself. Do whatever you want to do with it. Just repost it. Get it out there. And when YouTube comes along after 10 years, I made Lethal Injection in 2011. It's been up there 10 years. And then all of a sudden, all those people who'd shared it,
Oh man.
right? So it's multiple places on YouTube, like parts of it are now completely
Copyright.
scrubbed as if it never existed. No, nothing, gone,
Medical
100%.
misinformation, right? And they
So
all
that
got
means,
strikes and everything.
well, that means that they they have some algorithm, and they scanned the whole thing and just searched for any part.
Wow.
Which, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to toot my horn, but that was a very important piece of
I
work
agree. I
that
agree.
really, part three that I'm going to put out is, part two was more like you can't trust the medical system and the history of that, but part
Gain of
two,
function.
part three of lethal injection, which is on vaccines, man, that's gonna, it tells you the whole process of how autoimmune disease works, and the the inserts and what they tell you have the whole illness. Even the studies that have now finally been done where they have, vaccinated versus unvaccinated children. There's no disease over here and every disease over here. It's so obvious. So to put it all together in one thing,
Yeah.
that's going to be a very, very important thing. But it's also reliant on that one part where they show how they sterilize horses with a
Oh,
vaccine.
that's right.
Right? Most important part in there, I think, is that's what's happening today. Right?
I mean, this is all, we're not giving any information. We're not saying anything. This is all, but it important. This is all important.
Well, it's fortunately what gave me a little bit of hope is the other day. I'm like, well, I wonder how many people have now shared it on these alternative platforms. So BitChute
Yeah.
and my main one is Odyssey, Red Pill Sunday School.
Okay.
I looked on those too, and it's on there 20, 30 times, which made me pretty happy because that's the only way. If each one gets 100 hits, that's great.
Yeah.
you know, mine was up to, I don't know, it was like 400,000 hits before they took it off, and then all of
Jeez.
the other ones combined, it was an incredible amount of people that had watched it and posted it, and it's just gone.
Well,
All the
Clint, that's
websites.
terrible. That's terrible, Clint. So is
It's
that what your thank you and good luck blog post was about? Because my phone would not load it.
Yeah,
I'm like,
dude, the girl I interviewed with the other day. I mean, she's she's more popular than I certainly ever was. She'd interview people. Her friends were like, uh, what's his name, Jordan Maxwell, and those kind of
oh, sure,
high
sure, sure. Yeah, yeah.
profile shit. And she's like, I've never seen someone so censored before. I tried to share a link, and she said that when she tried to put my show up, the show up, and she put my name in there, they denied it. She spelled it
Jeez.
the way I spelled it on my book, and I guess they accepted it. Um,
So note to self, right?
Dude, I mean, no, it's nuts what's happening. So my blog is the main one because that's kind of my central little hub there. What I've been doing for
Ever.
13 years or whatever.
Jeez, man.
It can't be found in search engines. Right now,
Wow.
I used to be able to type in just reality blogger. It only has one G, so it was really unique. And then whatever subject I wanted, it would pull up my blog, and I'd be like,
Boom.
fact, da 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 da, and I could read it right on air, as if I knew what I was talking about, right? But I had this giant thing
Yeah.
that I could access, and now I'd have to be in the site, and it's much harder to do. But like, so the problem is, and the problem with shadow banning is people don't get it, and I think you don't really understand it until it happens to you, because people don't. If you don't know my name, well, they're like, well, I can type in Clint Richardson and you look. Well, yeah, but if you don't know my name,
Right. Right.
what is that going to do? I mean, I, think for a minute. These are people who've never heard of me, so no name, no website. How do you find me? There is no way, even if I type in realityblogger.wordpress.com into the search bar.
With one G.
Right. But I type it in the eight where you normally put addresses, it'll come up because you're using the exact address. But if I type the exact address in the search bar, the only thing it'll pull up are other websites that have quoted my.
Wow.
It will not pull up my blog.
Jeez.
I type in Cracking the cult of the Constitution, one of my most popular things. It pulls up anybody who's copied it, which is why, in the first place, I was like, well, copy this stuff. Someday it could be gone. I didn't realize it would be
now.
I didn't realize couldn't even have contemplated it's in the shadows. It's
Yes.
there but not there, right? It's not available for search. I couldn't have imagined that kind of censorship. Because I guess I couldn't have imagined the Internet of Things and all this organization and all these algorithms and all this artificial intelligence. I mean,
it's happening fast.
Dude,
going fast.
Like I said, unless you experience it firsthand, I mean, it's concerning me more than any other thing. Is this blatant censorship, right? And the problem is when you're censored, you can't really get your work out. It's
well, Clint, thanks for coming on AquaBrain, man. I really appreciate you coming on, and I think the message to everyone is get your spiritual, start working on spiritual.
Not to get caught up in contracts, but unfortunately, like I said, you get your computer, you're all excited, you click yes, I agree to this agreement. And you've just put yourself into hell, essentially, like commercial. So it's happening almost on an automatic basis now. You get your phone, you get your this, you get Microsoft Word. It's leased to you, and so you can't buy it anymore. You can't.
Yeah, pay to play.
I mean, you got to understand that this is the way they're getting. They're not taking you outright and saying you're now a global citizen. They're making you sign or agree to, and your use is a consent, right? Use is the highest form of saying I consent to something. I consent to the law behind what I'm using. You're little by little, everything you do is being put into this international law, which is why I think people have no clue how to act in court, because these courts aren't actually constitutional courts. They're administrative courts. And the law, the contract, right? The maxim for this show, the contract makes the law. That is the maxim of law. That will always apply to any case. So whatever you've signed or agreed to or gotten into by your use of something is what will determine how you're administrated down the road. And you will not be able to say, well, our law says this. You might be in Belgium law and you can't even say the language. That's how bad this is. And I'm so concerned for people because you don't know it. You don't see it happening. But like I said, the video I'm going to make will explain the entirety of this nation state thing, the history of it, and it will be a lot more clear because that was kind of still when I'm like, wait a minute, this is something this is what Montgomery was talking about years ago when I said, hey, come on for an interview. No, I quit. I stopped that bullshit movement a long time ago. I said, why? He said, well, international law of nations. And now I get what he was saying, because it took me this long to finally start looking from that master, international body sort of, new world order, if you will, purview. And that's always been there. But now it's becoming its own monster. So anyway,
thanks for coming on AquaBrain.
So thanks, man.
Thanks for joining us on this installment of AquaBrain TV. Check us out at Brain Aqua. This is how you subscribe to Clint. This is how you subscribe to us. This is a video we think you'll like. Till next time.